All right, we would like to begin the panel on ethics, politics, and aesthetics. My name is Maria Constanza Garrido Sierralta. I'm the co-founder of the Critical Praxis Cooperative and also a first-year master's student in philosophy at the University of New Mexico. And before we begin, I would like to address something that goes along the lines of the university engagement that Dr. Chavez and Dr. Joseph addressed, but also within the classroom itself. And I think in philosophy classrooms, we come across this quite frequently. And I would like to read you a quote from something I read recently. So it begins like this. To an Eskimo or to a South American, even our most popular philosophies would have to seem altogether incomprehensible. And he continues, he does not even have enough sense for those. Of course, he as a gendered pronoun. But I would like to say that this quote is coming from Schelling. And no surprise, right? But the general justification we get, or even, this is sometimes not even addressed and totally dismissed in classroom. The justification given for this is that they were men of their time. And I refuse to accept such a justification. Mainly because their philosophies were inspired by historical events such as the French Revolution, and they idealized systems of philosophy based on freedom, but whose freedom? So I refuse to accept such apologist positions to justify that they were just men of their time, because abolitionist movements happened at that time. And you can read Olaudah Equiano's narrative that was published in 1789, just the year of the revolution. And this quote comes from the treatise explicatory of the idealism in the science of knowledge, which was published in 1797. So you can't just say that they were not exposed to abolitionist movements. So I will not accept such a justification, and I will never do. So before continuing this, I will present the panelists today presenting. So Dan Friedman will be presenting, co-presenting actually, but we have also videos from Miguel Cortés and Fernanda Liberali. And their presentation is titled Performance as Praxis, Case Studies in the Transformative Power of the Dialective of Being and Becoming. So you will be given 30 minutes, and enjoy.
Thank you for the 30 minutes. It's not just me talking, we have some really interesting video. So here we are at the Critical Praxis Congress, and I'm going to introduce what may be a very new and or at least in some ways unusual approach to praxis that I want to share with you. I'm here to share the praxis of an international community of activists of which I am a part. It's a community that, while saturated in progressive values, is not rooted in epistemology or ideology, but rather in actively supporting people to create new possibilities for how to be in the world. New possibilities are generated when people do new things or do old things in new ways, not when they do what they already know how to do. The community that I am a part of has embraced play, improvisation, and performance as its methodology. All three activities are carried out socially and without knowing what we're doing. Now, this community of playful revolutionaries emerged from grassroots community organizing in New York City more than 40 years ago. Today, it is embraced and adapted as an approach to social change and development in many areas of North and South America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And I'll be providing a brief overview of this performance as praxis, and then introducing two digital reports from people using it, Miguel Cortés in Juarez, Mexico, and Fernanda Liberali in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Now, Miguel is a community psychologist. Fernanda is a professor of education. I'm the artistic director of the Castillo Theater, a 37-year-old progressive political theater in New York City. The international community of Praxis we are a part of includes as well artists of many sorts, school teachers, youth workers, doctors and nurses and other medical workers, community and labor organizers, volunteers in migrant and refugee camps, political activists, and ordinary, quote, ordinary working people from many walks of life. In short, it is culturally, experientially, geographically, and professionally diverse. What the various individuals and groups that make up this community have in common is a praxis, rooted in play and performance, through which they are seeking new ways to empower the poor and oppressed, to build community, to address local and international social and political issues, to bring antagonistic forces and communities together, to heal trauma, to educate, and to free the imaginations of those who have had their imaginations beaten or bombed or starved out of them. Now, of course, the logical next question is, what does play and performance have to do with transforming our economic and political systems? Well, if you think of play as what children do and what adults do in our leisure time, and if you think of performance as what actors and singers do on stage, then it really has nothing to do with it. However, if you understand and approach play and performance as a revolutionary activity of human beings, then everything. The idea of revolutionary activity as performance is part of the practical critical psychology, social therapeutics, developed by Fred Newman and Lois Holzman, who we heard from virtually yesterday, who were greatly inspired by the Soviet psychologist Lev Vygotsky. Now, social therapeutics is part of a much larger shift in understanding what it means to be human. Over the last 40 years or so, a general consensus has emerged among anthropologists, performance studies researchers and theorists, theater historians, postmodern and cultural historical psychologists, and play researchers, and to a lesser extent among some social change activists, that performance is universal in human cultures, and not only or even primarily in the theater. Rituals, whether religious, a Catholic Mass, for example, or secular, a tailgate party at an American football game, are performances in which the whole social unit, the church congregation, or the fans at the football stadium parking lot, take part. There is also performance involved, and this is where it is of direct concern to us here, whenever we human beings, individually or collectively, try something new. When we try a new way of relating to our spouse, or to our kids, or to our boss, when we decide or are forced to take on a new job or trade, or defy a social convention, or attempt to interface differently with another community, we are performing. Performing, as we have come to understand it, is the human capacity to be who you are and who you are not simultaneously, or who you are and who you are becoming at the same time. Think of babies drawing pictures and performing like artists when they're not. Think of a 6-year-old in a school play, or a professional actor on stage being who they are and the character they're playing at the same time. In that performance space, that energy, that tension, that dialectic between who you are and who you aren't, all sorts of possibilities and ways of new emotions, new thoughts, new ways of relating can emerge. And I say social possibilities because performance is never done alone. It's a social activity with social and hence cultural and political implications. It is this ability, we have come to believe, that allows human beings to develop beyond instinctual, socially organized, and patterned behavior, including the confines of bourgeois ideology or the patriarchal ideology and so on. And in the process, begin to find ways to move beyond our current cultural, economic, and political constraints. Fred Newman, who more than any other individual initiated and led this development community until he passed in 2011, put it this way, quote, "Performance may have nothing to do with what's going on stage. We think you can perform at home, at work, in any social setting, with the proper kind of support. People discover that they can do things through performance that we never thought we could do, broadening our notion of what you're allowed to do." Performance, then, is both mundane and revolutionary, and it is that contradiction that makes it so powerful as a means of generating social imagination and realizing concrete developmental transformation. This understanding of performance goes back to Marx's thesis on Feuerbach. There, Marx is criticizing his fellow materialist philosopher, Ludwig Feuerbach, for separating contemplation, or thought, analysis, reflection, from activity, from practice. He writes that Feuerbach, while acknowledging that people are shaped by material circumstances, and here I quote, forgets that circumstances are changed by people. The coincidence of the changing of circumstances and of human activity as self-changing can be conceived and rationally understood only as revolutionary practice. Feuerbach, Marx continues, quote, wants sensuous objects really distinct from thought objects, but he does not conceive human activity itself as objective activity. Hence, he does not grasp the significance of revolutionary, of practical, critical activity. The word praxis, as popularized by Ferrer and Gramsci, and now used by contemporary progressives, has its roots in what Marx here calls practical, critical activity. Praxis is not practice, nor is it thought and reflection. It is both at the same time. It is practical, critical, and that is its power. Now, the stumbling block for many progressive academics, indeed for progressives in general, is that we have tended to separate the critical from the practical and elevated it above activity. The working assumption of many progressives is that theory comes first, is tested by practice, and then modified if necessary when the application of the theory isn't working as anticipated. However, where can our theory come from but from the past activities of human beings, from what Gramsci called the cultural hegemony of the ruling class? In order to generate new ways of seeing, feeling, thinking, and being, we need to engage in the activity of challenging what Ferrer calls the structures that need to be transformed. It is through that engagement that we have something new to reflect upon. The trap we build when we put the critical first and elevate it above activity is that it leads to ideology, to a systematized and fossilized set of ideas which constrain and eventually shut down our critical capacities. Once embraced by groups of people, ideologies generate their own morality, traditions, and language. Our reflective capacity becomes constrained within the rigid frame of ideology and is replaced by the often violent sectarianisms of right and wrong, correct and incorrect, orthodox and revisionist. The ability to reflect on one's activity becomes severely compromised as the ideology devolves into an ever more closed system. Now here I'd like to step back for a minute just to give you a sense of what has actually been built through this activity that has embraced performance as praxis. For the last 4 decades, it has been a large-scale, multi-generational social experiment in building, self-organizing, grassroots organizations independent of state financing and regulation that, in the words of my colleague Lois Holtzman, quote, in the very design and activity, these organizations are designed to challenge the foundations of their traditional counterparts. And what has been built, including our collective understanding of what we're doing, has grown out of the activity of building it. It's been an extended social improvisation guided by the values of collectivity, cooperation, equity, and nonviolence. So upon entering, or before we started this session, you got a handout, which it's a 2-pager, and it lists the major organizations that have been generated by this community over the last 40 years, as it is the ones that exist now. It includes the All Stars Project and its many subdivisions, including my theater, the Castillo Theater. It includes the East Side Institute, which Dr. Holtzman heads up. It includes the Performing the World Conference and the Play, Perform, and Learn and Grow Conference in Europe, which is coming up next week. It includes the performing communities of Esperanza, which you'll hear more about from Miguel in a bit. So if you get a chance, you can look over that, and I'd be happy and eager to answer any questions you have about it. But one of the key features of performance as praxis, as we've developed it in building these organizations, is entering into an ongoing dialogue with people and communities to work out together how to create environments where we could create new possibilities together. All good performers, whether they're on stage or off, listen very intensely to those who they're performing with and work to respond in a way that builds their common activity. You can't know beforehand what you're going to hear. As Abby Hoffman, the old Yippie leader, put it, the key to organizing an alternative society is to organize people around what they can do and, more importantly, what they want to do. It is through this activity of building with diverse and ordinary people organizations that meet their needs and create new needs and wants and possibilities that we have come to our understanding of the dialectical unity of praxis. It's been through the activity of building grassroots organizations that we came to embrace performance as a revolutionary praxis. Think about it. When you're performing, the activity and the thought about the activity are inseparable. You know you're performing, so you're reflecting immediately, and then you're doing something at the same time. There's no separation of doing and reflecting, of practice and theory. We are the practical and the critical simultaneously. Given its inherent self-reflective nature, performance then, projected into the realm of social and political activism, consistently transforms its theory through the activity of its practice, and theory, self-reflexivity, constantly impacts on practice, although those terms, as distinct entities, lose much of their reflected meaning within the united activity of performance. A performer has no need for ideology. A performer needs to accept the offers of her fellow performers. To the extent that those offers are accepted and built upon, something new is created. Further, because performance incorporates that which does not yet exist, it's an activity that constantly, by its nature, is changing the world. That is, bringing new possibilities into social existence. Well, how can this praxis take on the global domination of finance, capital, and neoliberalism? How can it bring democracy to the United States? How can it stop the endless wars that are consuming more and more of our fellow human beings? I have no answer. What I do know is that every day in hubs of activity around the world, performance praxis is creating environments in which new possibilities are being generated. And what we can do with that is say yes and make our own offers and continue to build. So that's my general overview. Now, it's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce to you two video reports or presentations from two colleagues around the world who, for various complex personal and financial reasons, can't be here, but they've sent us some stuff. So the first person I want to introduce you to is Fernanda Liberali. She is a professor of in the Applied Linguistics Department of the Pontifical Catholic University in São Paulo. She's co-founder of LACI, which is a Portuguese acronym for Language Activities in the School Context, which works to improve teaching and learning in Brazil's schools. LACI is an unusual action research group in that it includes all the stakeholders, administrators, teachers, primary, middle, and high school students, in addition to university faculty, graduate and undergraduate students. Its intellectual roots and its praxis are rooted in Bakhtin, Ferrer, and like that of the development community I've been talking about, Lev Vygotsky. LACI is a response to the hierarchical, authoritarian, acquisitional models of modern and pre-modern education. It's an innovative experiment in developing what they call, echoing Vygotsky, a, quote, a collective form of working together. They see their mission as disrupting the passive, this is a quote now, disrupting the passive role that students are supposed to play in school, close quote, and generating environments in which students, teachers, and school administrators can break out of traditional behavior and begin to interact in new and creative ways. So while there are approximately 30 core LACI members, any specific event or meeting may include as many as 100 people across the spectrum of socio-economic status, age, gender, and educational level. They do so with the conviction shared by our development community worldwide that learning is a socially creative activity that has this kind of active involvement, and that this kind of active involvement is effective way for people to develop as learners, and with the recognition that teachers will be more effective and students more involved and do better on school learning tasks if they work together to create performatory environments in which to develop. Creating such a large and diverse zone of proximal development, to use Vygotsky's term, is an important factor in the success they've had in impacting on both public and private schools in Brazil over the last decade. And since 2016, LACE has also partnered with the School for the Deaf, adding deaf students and their teachers and interpreters to their group sessions. So they bring, as I said, teachers and principals and administrators and students together, along with researchers from the university, to create new kinds of relationships. And they can discuss some very deep stuff, but very specifically, because this report is more about the impact it's had than the actual way it works, I'm going to say a little bit about it. For example, they could take on the challenge of bullying, not by depending on teachers, who are supposed to be the enforcers to try and stop it, but by empowering the students to reorganize relationships in performatory ways to minimize and eliminate it. Another example they've done is in public schools in poor communities where maintenance, where dirt and upkeep are an issue, and where the principals are supposed to be responsible for that along with the maintenance staff. Students have organized themselves to clean the streets around the schools, to talk to people in their shops and homes in the area, and they've organized them to help with an ongoing upkeep of the neighborhood. They even planted and maintained vegetable gardens on the school grounds to supplement the diet of the students and teachers. Another example, recent example, is that they brought many students together to study the elections that were coming up by having students and teachers read the programs of the various parties contesting in the election. And there were 20 parties on the ballot in the last election in Brazil. Then they took those ideas that appealed to them and formed their own parties with a name, a campaign jingle, and a platform, and work was then done on how to hold debates at which, instead of seeking to destroy your opponents, you were working to create something constructive together. LACE's most recent project is DigitMed, which is short for Digital Media Education, which is connected to similar projects in Greece, Russia, and Germany. And the goal is in this project is to find ways of using digital media, not simply as a new audiovisual tool to teach in old ways, but to disrupt and democratize the educational process. So that's sort of a long introduction, but I thought it was necessary to understand what we're going to be seeing is we're going to be hearing from students, teachers, and researchers about the impact that LACE has had on them. So if Molly will now click the right button, and you'll see this report from Brazil.
Hi everyone! DigitMed makes us development our critical thinking, and also it makes us join the theory and the practice.
In DigitMed, I have voice and I can say what I think about current affairs.
E o projeto mudou muito assim a minha vida, porque tanto acadêmica, tanto pessoal. Tinha muita vergonha e hoje em dia eu não tenho mais essa vergonha para apresentar para o público e tal.
And it's really important for me because it makes me feel a new person. I can express myself in this project, which is a very, very, very nice thing.
O DigitMed é um projeto muito importante para mim, porque foi através dele que eu comecei a desenvolver meu senso crítico e minha argumentação.
Participating on DigitMed is very rich for us because we can exchange experiences and we can know different people and different learnings.
O grupo DigitMed abre portas para o aluno conhecer o professor e o professor conhecer o aluno.
It's an innovative project. The context of the project is organized by diversity, in which all participants perform different roles.
And my experience with DigitMed has changed the way I have been working with the teachers and collaborating with students at the school.
I participate of DigitMed. My experience is very rich because we can exchange
learned that how to work together and how to make this kind of work make the difference in the classrooms.
DigitMed becomes possible university, elementary and high school work together to improve our world.
Como eu me sinto participando desse programa? Eu me sinto feliz, eu me sinto livre. Eu sinto que nós podemos melhorar a nossa sociedade para melhor e nós vamos conseguir.
O projeto DigitMed se tornou muito importante na minha vida por conta que, com ele, eu pude compreender que pode ter mudanças nas escolas.
O projeto é muito importante para mim, pois nele eu tive espaço para debater, aprender, conversar e fazer a diferença.
And amongst other things, what I find very interesting is the fact that we always have the chance to reflect upon the theoretical framework that goes within our actions.
DigitMed é muito legal. A gente tinha voz, a gente podia conversar mais e ver o professor como um amigo.
Estou há mais de 5 meses no DigitMed. Conversando lá e estou falando tudo que eu penso. E está sendo muito importante tudo isso para mim.
I have learned in DigitMed how to work together with children and teenagers towards a transformative and critical collaborative education.
A possibilidade de, naquele projeto, a pessoa ser sujeito no mundo, poderem exercer toda a sua subjetividade.
And the most incredible thing is that when we are all together, we can create unimaginable situations and things.
We all are intentionally together to be able to make a difference in our country.
Algo marcante no projeto é o cenário que ele cria para que mais posições e diferentes agentes do contexto escolar possam pensar coletivamente.
As a researcher, I like the fact of all the projects are result of many reflections and different ideas with a group, with different people.
Para mim, o DigitMed é uma forma também de nós compartilharmos as nossas experiências com outras pessoas para nós incentivá-las a mudar o nosso mundo. Viva DigitMed!
Okay. Now, to save time, let me introduce our next video quickly. Our third presentation is from Miguel Eduardo Cortez Vasquez, the director of the Fred Newman Center in Juarez, Mexico. The first center dedicated to the performance-based praxis of social therapy in the Spanish-speaking world. He is also an advocate for learning disability educational rights through his project Heterolexia. Cortez received his BA in psychology at the University of Texas, El Paso, and his master's degree in family therapy from the Regional Institute for Family Therapy in the city of Chihuahua. Over the past decade, he has received extensive training in social therapeutics from the East Side, which you'll note on the handout is an international training center. I'm not going to tell you much about the work, the praxis of Miguel and his colleagues in Juarez and El Paso, because he's going to tell you in the video. For now, suffice it to say that Miguel began organizing over 10 years ago with youth and children in some of Juarez's poorest areas, where gangs, drug and alcohol abuse and violence were reaching war-like dimensions. His roots are in Latin American liberation theology and Pablo Freire's pedagogical insights. In recent years, Cortez and his colleagues have been influenced by the performatory, practical, critical methodology that I've been talking about, social therapeutics. In his words, quote, the therapeutic aspects of the performing arts and the performative aspects of therapy, all with the goal of reinitiating activism and development in people and communities. He has been a key leader in bringing his work in Juarez together with the work of the Institute for Improvisation and Social Action, which is based in El Paso, and to create together the bilingual cross-border organization, Performing Communities de Esperanza. I'll let Miguel take it from here.
Hi, my name is Miguel Cortez. I'm the director of the Centro Fred Newman para la Terapia Social.
that's located in Ciudad Juárez, Mexico. As you may know, Ciudad Juárez is a border town located between Texas and New Mexico. And you can see here an image of the border itself, and you can see that infamous wall right there that is being erected. And in recent years, we've lived a lot of violence in my city, in Juarez. Really painful violence. And more recently, El Paso has suffered its own share of violence. And I want to present to you the story of how two organizations, one in Juarez and one in El Paso, are challenging borders by building a binational performance community. And by challenging, I mean creating a community across the border, challenging our own conceptual borders, and challenging our ideas of what can or cannot be done in creating a better environment for our cities and for the world. So the two organizations that I'm going to be talking about are the Centro Fred Newman, which I mentioned, and Improvisa, which I'm going to describe you in a few moments. And together we created a coalition called Performing Communities de Esperanza. So I'm going to present this story through images. And first, let me start with the Centro Fred Newman. So I'm going to be referring to the numbers on the image and so you can relate to that. So I began to learn about social therapy in 2007 through the international class, which is a year-long course where people from around the world get together, both online and in person, to learn in a practical way, social therapeutics, which is a radically relational, cultural approach to human development, community building, and leadership. And its core practice is to relate people as active performers and social creators of their lives. So in image number 1, you can see Lois Holzman, founder of the Eastside Institute, and Dr. Carrie Loveman, director of Revolutionary Conversation, also from the Eastside Institute. And we learned through their performance how to create community using performance, play, improvisation. And it was a very inspiring visit, which kick-started a long partnership with the Eastside Institute. And in image number 2, you can see Performing the World, which is a conference that takes place every 2 years, where performance activists explore together the power of performance and play to create a better world. And so we've been part of Performing the World for more than 10 years now. And it's a gathering of community. And that's been part of our growth locally. And I also want to share in image number 3, my group. I'm part of a social therapy group where that's called Developing Across Borders, led by Barbara Silverman. And it's a virtual group that gathers people from different countries. In my group, there's people from Costa Rica, from Denmark, from the US, from different parts of the world. And that's been a group that's been central to my growth. So I'm sharing and I'm starting this because in being part of an international community that really pushes us to create locally, we've been able to bring a lot of creativity to our work. So in image number 4, you can see on the left one of my community education classes, which I taught for many years. And there you see a project where students were able to raise more than a third of the treatment for a cancer patient, a fellow student. and it was a very inspiring activity. But like this, there's other really beautiful projects that the students decided to create throughout the semester. On the right, you can see a group of teachers that want to learn our approach to be able to bring more creativity to their group. So we have been invited constantly to different trainings. In this case, the Graduate College of Teachers Education. Image 5, you can see one of the many group building workshops we've done with other organizations in Juarez and in Chihuahua and other parts of Mexico. And where we use creativity, what we've learned internationally to allow groups to explore in new and different ways the importance of their work and new avenues of action. Number 6, you can see Dr. Cecilia Munoz from Paraguay, and we were invited to her class, and we connected virtually, and we had the opportunity to share our experiences. So it's this back and forth between building locally, building internationally, that has helped us really grow and get different perspectives, such as the image you see in number 7, which is an activity called Jugando Juntos. And here you see a group of families that don't know each other playing pillow fights. That might not seem as huge, but in a city where the violence has really been very strong, it's a very impressive act of people coming together and play. Or in image number 8, you see one of my social therapy groups, parents with kids with special needs who, in their group, they share their struggles with the different labels imposed on their children, and it's really inspiring to see how they are able to support each other to grow beyond those labels and create more support between them. So this is the type of work we do in Juarez. And our colleagues from Improvisa, which is the Institute for Improvisation and Social Action, it's an organization that supports people to develop through improvisation and performance while advocating for a developmental approach to social action. And their work is rooted in experimental improvisation performance to generate new questions, to create open new possibilities, to shake long-held beliefs. We met them in 2012 at a Performing the World conference, and we just really were impacted by each other's work, and we wanted to bring them to Juarez. So we were able to organize that in 2014. They created a series of workshops. We didn't know that eventually, a year and a half later, they would be moving to El Paso and be our neighbors. Since then, they've created beautiful projects like the Catleya Project, an artistic, social, and cultural development activities for women who have suffered domestic violence and sexual violence in Juarez. And they do this workshop with artists, and they bring artists from El Paso and from Juarez to shelters in my city. And they're also bringing that project to El Paso soon, along with a ton of other activities, including their ensemble Knee Jerk, which brings together professional and amateur musicians and dancers to create innovative and experimental performance experiences. One of their activities is their invitation to the community to join group play, where they play with people every month in El Paso. and we've been part of some of their activities. So really, this short presentation doesn't do justice to the type of work that our colleagues do in El Paso. So in 2017, we created Performing Communities de Esperanza. We invited Lois Holtzman to come to the border again in that organization effort that you see here in image 13, or the series of images where you can see Lois giving different talks, doing workshops, and having different conversations. That helped us realize the importance of challenging our condition as a border to create a performance community across our cities and beyond, because we want to reach out to our international community. So since then, we've gathered, as you've seen in image 14, we've gathered bi-weekly to create different activities, such as inviting Tom Bernard, founder of Magicians Without Borders, who was a close friend of Improvisa. And there you see him doing magic in downtown Juarez. Or number 16, where you see all of us playing together in a park in Juarez, in an activity we've called Picnic de Desarrollo. So it's through that wonderful work, both of my colleagues and Paola Lopez, who's a really gifted community organizer and artist, that we've, along with the people we collaborate, she's the director of Improvisa, that we've been able to do really inspiring work, like the remodeling of the Fred Newman Center, which is, we see it as our center of action in Juarez. So you can see a series of images where we created a crowdfunding effort that took several months, and we were able to involve people from many different countries to contribute to our center, which is not only going to help us build community locally, but also internationally. So this is, in very broad strokes, our coalition. Dan can give you this information, which I'm just going to present briefly, our web pages, and my email and phone number, in case you want to learn more about our work. So thank you so much, and hope to hear from you to be able to extend our community and our work to other places.
Well, thank you, Dr. Freeman, Miguel Cortez, and Fernanda Liberali for their work. Due to the nature of things, we are likely to extend this panel a few more minutes to allow our next presenter some more time, and also a Q&A session. So our next presenter is Silvana Hernandez Ortiz, and she comes from my native country, Chile. Her presentation is titled Critical Analysis of the Press Release Comments of the New Law Relating to Repeating School in Chile. We're likely to go until 11:45.
Buenos dias, konnichiwa, or as we say in my land, mari mari wanul, what does it mean? Hello, my friends. Today, I'm gonna talk to you about a new law that affects our public education in Chile, my country. But many of the discourse and ideologies that arise from capitalism affect the conception of the human being, in this case, our children. This is the outline. The aim of this study is to carry out a critical study on the configuration of the public discourse around the new law of the school reputations, based on the guidelines provided by critical discourse analysis. In order to do it, this study will track the process of recontextualization of discourse through the analysis of online comment presented upon the new law of the reputation in Chile, made by the user of online version of the new paper called El Mercurio. In internet is emol.cl, is the most readed newspaper. It's a very traditionalistic paper, so they had like everything an agenda. With my team, we ask this kind of questions about these investigations, like how is the discourse on school reputation recontextualized after the launch of the new law reputation? And like psychologists, I wonder what are the ideologies underlying this discourse regarding repetitive school children. But I need to understand what is reputation, right? Reputation has been considered as a strategy for coping with a low academic achievement, considering the automatic promotion harms students who have failed to meet the curricular objectives established by the school. However, its effectiveness has not been fully proven, and there has been a broad debate about it. Our framework, critical discourse studies, understand language as a social practice, which implies a dialectical relationship between discourse and the context from which it emerges. The discourse will be socially constituted and socially conditioned, and among its main property will be the power to constitute forms of knowledge as well as social identities as the relation between people and groups. CDS make it possible to approach the construction of ideologies which are increasingly difficult to identify. The main reason is that they are presented as neutral through position, opinions, or belief, which demand a critical look. For this year, it was expected that a new school repeated law will come into force, which eliminate the requirement of a special academic approval, which will be governed by the criteria of the professionals of each school, who will decide on the promotion or reputation of the students, with the objective of promoting evaluation focuses on integrative learning of school children and not only the grades. Within this context, and in the face of the uncertainty that implementation of this new law raises, a question arises of the social level regarding the effectiveness and purpose of the new law. The speeches generated on the basis of the news open the debate to what Chilean society understands by learning. Repetition and school failure evidence a political background strongly rooted in the basis of the capitalist economic model in which we find ourselves. To date, one of for 15 years old has repeated at least one grade. The country ranks 50 on the world with the highest repetition rates, about 11% of its students repeat grades. This is the new in the paper. You can read it if you want, but they say that the exception is considered an inadequate response to students' difficulties, which can be replaced by adaptation or adjustment of their learning and assessment opportunity. Okay, this is our methodology. This is really bothering me. Okay, we had the two questions of our research: how the discourse on school reputation reconstructualized after launching the new law, and what the ideology underlying this discourse, etc. This is the data collection procedure. The new was chosen. A total of 257 comments we are posed. For read that comment, we need to make an account and be registered. These comments were clustered between those regarding reputation and those that we not related to the topic, because many comments are focusing in the way that the news are writing, or the pronouns that we use, her or she. So, and many discussion between the users, like always happen in a photo. A total of 50 comments was chosen regarding relevant comments on what it means to repeat in Chile. So we analyzed that 50 comments. At the first time, when we analyze this new, we can realize that it's possible to understand the expose in the newspaper El Mercurio has not been fully understood for the people who made the comments, since they understand this new law as an absolute, without considering the academic and school process. In the second place, the reputation is assumed in direct way as a quality of the person, it means the kid, which will drag even in his adult life, and that of some form will condition in a determined way is his professional and social development. In Chile, when you ask for a job, they don't ask you for your university. They ask for your school, where you study. So we can understand the strong how it is. There is a social prevailing that must repeat the year in order to get out to the ignorance developed by its mediocrity. However, when it comes to repeat, the student is immersed in the condemnation that evident his condition of lazy and mediocre perpetual, where no matter how hard he strives, he will never cease to be catalogued as the who's the one repeat. By the other hand, and in a smaller scale, allusion to the role of the family and teachers are considered by the EMIT user as a triggering factor of the condition of the mediocrity. Absent parents, carefree, and little linked to the training given in schools versus the incompetent teachers at the moment of the provoking the necessary motivation in their students, so what they study and pass. However, they are not seen as the culprits of repetition, but as mere facilitator on the road to it. Okay, we use a methodology from Theo van Leeuwen. And Theo proposed a matrix for analyzing the discourse, and I bring to here two examples. This is the comment of some user. This measure only deepens the mediocrity that is already promoted in the current Chilean education. Currently, a student may have reached high school having failed in previous years. It doesn't matter to learn, only to approve. Do you want to have a quality education? The reputation, if well used, is an opportunity for the student to amend what he did not achieve and thus overcome its limitation. It is in adult life when we have done something wrong or didn't not go as we wish. We didn't not try to prove it. That is the meritocracy. Here, in the matrix from Evaluwen, we can separate this phrase in action, actor time, reason for action, justification, authority, moral evaluation, and rationalization. The action is do not repeat. The actor is the student who failed. The time is in the future. The reason for that action depends the mediocrity of Chilean education. That justifies the well-used reputation in it is an opportunity for the student to amend what he did not achieve. The authority moral in our life, when we have done something wrong or it has not gone as we wanted, do not intend to improve it. And that is the rationalization. Example 2. This is a very strong phrase because it is a strategy of long-term social control, ignorant masses, controllable masses with charming words and the phrases like equality, diversity, inclusion, among many other of the Progressive Dictionary. Can you see this again, the analysis for the phrase? In this case, we don't have the authority moral evaluation, but we can put the other components like this. And this another example. The comment is going down. It is thus the lazy one as manipulative and is a sure vote for the left right, or the left wing, sorry. They say in deep test who repeated or who want to quit that kind of strategy of education means it's because it's lazy and if maybe he thinking like a communist, okay? The possible implications, the different social classes, and especially in the Chilean middle class, within the current neoliberal and capitalist economic model, constantly resort to competition and speeches of meritocracy as a way of validating the difference between social classes. This is in order to establish, in a certain way, their identity within them and with this, their social position within the capitalist system, which is the new law of automatic school promotion is in certain sense to modify. School failure and consequent school reputation have their own component of social exclusion, which can refer to previous condition that generated failure or subsequent conditions to do it. Finally, beyond the stigma and social punishment that it currently has, reputation is understood as determinant of the economic factor and class condition. Without this system of reputation, it will be even more difficult to differentiate oneself from the masses of failure that manages to pass, even though they have violated the rule of merit, generating annoyance at a general level on the part of the Chilean population. I left the reference list if you want to deepen in our work about it.
We will allow 15 minutes for a Q&A. Please go to the podium to ask questions to our panelists.
Hi, good afternoon, almost afternoon. Thank you for presenting. You guys leave me with a lot of things to work around in my brain. I'm wondering, in terms of performance, I'm wondering, as a past professional dancer and digesting Aristotle's Poetics, I'm wondering, both of you, what your responsibility of words and kind of verbal expression is to, you know, these topics, but also performance in general.
Maybe I can ask you a question back because I'm not sure what you're asking. Responsibility of words meaning?
So I'm thinking about performance being not just sort of speeches on stages or things that are said on stage, but an interaction between sort of body, movement, and words that are being said, and wondering if the discernment about what is said, how it is said, what language it's said in impacts the performance, both for the performer and for the audience.
Right. Okay, well, it might be helpful to expand performance from they're thinking of it having an audience and a performer. Our approach is to think of people's interaction as a performance that we can play with. So for the most part, when we bring performance into the organizing activity, we approach it as an improvisation. We approach it as we listen very carefully to what the people we're working with are saying, what they're suggesting, what they want, and then we say yes, and we add to that, and then we hopefully create an environment where they can say yes, and we continue to build the organizations and the activities of that particular workshop. I mean, we also obviously, I run a theater. We do theater which uses words, but for the most part, our theater devises its plays. We don't have a single author. We have the actors and the directors and everyone working together, again, in an improvisational way, bringing in suggestions, writing pieces. But from the point of view of Praxis, I think what's really important to understand about performance is that if it's going to be growthful, it needs to be an improv. And that isn't to say that we don't bring all of our baggage with us to that improv. Of course we do. The question is, are we open to bringing it and then building something new with my baggage and your baggage to create an environment where something creative and positive can emerge? I don't know if that directly answers you, but that's, I guess, the best I can do.
I hope that I can understand you. In my case, the discourse, especially if you see titles in media or mass media, has very strong effect in the people. It's kind of obviously, but the people take the headlines like a true. In this case, for example, a news from, we can change the law, but we don't have any idea in what consists this law, because it's not published. So all the people only think and judge the kids or our students only by headline. So that is the importance of the discourse and the ideology behind them.
Any other question?
Being you're from Chile, a couple of you are from Chile, has particular pertinence, of course, because of the history of the U.S. helping to overthrow,
Salvador Allende.
yeah, slipping my mind for the moment. A bad thing growing old. Anyway, but this is particularly pertinent, the critical analysis of a press release, which I would say includes all press releases here in the United States, which I'm concerned with, of the DOD in particular, but of the State Department and other agencies, were, with what Gramsci professed and helped people understand, wasn't just to the left, it was also to the right. And in fact, Gramsci, I think, may well have been, his theory came from his experience under the fascists, who had already really applied mass manipulation in coming to power, in understanding how to use psychological control through words, etc. So I guess my question is just to perhaps expand on that a bit and to talk about how the United States government now, the DOD in particular, uses the term perception management. A book by an Israeli former spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces is about hearts and minds, the battle for consciousness. So I think I'm trying to point out how sophisticated and how much beyond any other country the United States has become in what they call perception management, or Israel calls a battle for consciousness, in creating and enforcing this ideology that we're now under, which I call as a form of democratic fascism, for no better term. Sheldon Wolin, a political theorist from Princeton University, who's passed away unfortunately, used the term inverted totalitarianism to describe the United States, and that was in 2003. Of course, it's gotten even worse since then, I would argue. So I think it's essential that we apply critical analysis, not to routine statements coming out from our own government, which are in fact intended as perception management, which goes so far to keep us in this perpetual war and keep the support of the populace for it, which the U.S. government learned in Vietnam they had to do, in their opinion. Otherwise, the people would realize how destructive the wars are. Anyway, I guess perhaps you could expand upon that a little bit from the experience of Chile when the United States put Pinochet into power back in the 1970s, and what the current state of that is in U.S. Involvement with Chile.
Thank you. I'll translate this part slowly.
Yeah, because it's a very long question, so it's better. El diario del Mercurio.
El Mercurio, which is our newspaper, the most used one, the ones that she took the comments from.
Desde siempre ha estado hasta cierto punto comprometido con los gobiernos, principalmente de derecha.
So this newspaper is widely known that it has been aligned with right-wing governments.
De hecho, solo por tema de tiempo voy a mencionar un ejemplo que ocurrió este año.
And just for a matter of time, I'm just going to mention one example.
Este 11 de septiembre se conmemoraba nuevamente el golpe de Estado en nuestro país.
This 11th of September, we commemorated the coup d'etat that happened in our country.
Y el diario del Mercurio volvió a publicar lo que se publicó en 1973 con respecto a este suceso.
And so El Mercurio published again on its newspaper what had occurred and what had been written on September 11, or actually 12, the day after, right?
No, I believe that on the same day.
The same day, what was published the same day during the coup?
Like a vintage post. Publicaron que gracias a este nuevo gobierno tendríamos pan, tendríamos desarrollo, tendríamos una mejor economía.
that thanks to this new government, we will be having bread, a better economy.
Imagínense lo que fue para las personas de los detenidos desaparecidos volver a recordar esas noticias publicadas en el año 73.
And you can just imagine the impact it had on the families of the missing to have such a news republished after so long.
Fue un irrespeto a la memoria de los desaparecidos.
It was disrespectful towards the memory of the missing.
Y eso lo valida un diario de alta frecuencia en nuestro país y de gran impacto, como ustedes pueden ver.
And this is validated by a newspaper that has such a great impact in our population.
Y que en cierta manera da los lineamientos a lo que piensa la gente en nuestra sociedad. Por tanto, después ellos son los que emiten los juicios.
And so this gives the dictates of what people should think in our society.
Just a brief comment on the notion of perception management by the state. Obviously, in the United States, for example, almost every family has a television set, and a particular way of seeing the world is streamed to us. And I think the only way out of that control is for people to get together and create new things, new organizations, new environments where they can see that perception management in new ways and challenge it. It's an activity of organizing from the bottom.
So we ran out of time a while back. We're just gonna thank our panelists and people who were not with us. So Dr. Dan Friedman, Dr. Fernanda Liberali, and Miguel Cortez, and also Silvana Hernandez Ortiz for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. That was very moving. Almost brought me to tears to think about the missing. So we have lunch in the cafe, 11:45. We'll be back here for politicized healing workshop at 1 o'clock. And make sure you have a meal ticket. That's it. Thank you.